Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Camp Blount Historic Site. This is a wonderful, wonderful day for Fayetteville and Lincoln County in the state of Tennessee, and we're so proud to have all of you here today to help us to dedicate this statue. You know, it's October 1813, 207 years ago today, or this month. General Jackson mustered troops here through a order of Governor Willie Blount to raise 2,500 volunteers to go to Horseshoe Bend in the Creek Indian War, and 4,500 showed up. And then again in 1814, General Jackson mustered here again to go to the Battle of New Orleans and defeat the British. So this site is very, very important to American history. It's where Jackson first referred to his troops as his Tennessee Volunteers, and that relates back to the fact that today we are called the Volunteer State. So Fayetteville and Lincoln County is going to lay claim to that, and that's what we're going to unveil here in just a little while. We've got several people that are on our speakers today, but there's a few people that I want to make sure and thank for things that have been done over the last several years for us to get to this point. If you'll bear with me just a second. First of all, Jerry Mansfield and South Central Human Resource Agency, they're the ones that came up with the master plan that we've been going by the last several years to get the things done that you see here today. Former director of the Tennessee Wars Commission, Mr. Fred Prouty, was he went to battle for us, and he was one of the ones that helped to get it done for the state of Tennessee to purchase this land. We want to thank the Kidd and the Phillips families that owned this property. They were willing to sell it to the state and allow us to be able to develop it into the Camp Blount Historic Site. We want to thank the Fayetteville and Lincoln County Industrial Board. When the purchase was being worked on, they agreed to buy 1 acre to help us to get that project done, and we want to thank them for that. We formed Camp Blount Historic Site Association, which is a 501c3, and many of you out there today, I think, are charter members of that organization, and you've helped us to raise money to be able to have matching funds for grants and things that we have been able to do here at the site. Former Governor Haslam and Mr. Jim Henry and the entire General Assembly of the state of Tennessee, Governor Haslam in his last budget gave us an appropriation that we used to do the majority of what you're seeing here today as far as work on this site. Fayetteville Public Utilities, they came last week and set the statue for us, and they cleared all the underbrush down next to the river, and we certainly appreciate that. It made the site look a whole lot better. The leadership class of 2016, they were the ones that started, I guess got everything going by the fact that they raised the money as their class project for the base that the statue's sitting on. We certainly want to thank them. Mr. Jim Tracy is on our program, but rural development, we had a grant from them to do the entrance sign, and we appreciate that. Tennessee Wars Commission, we've gotten a couple of grants that went toward the statue, and we appreciate them. Mr. Tom Bailey was our civil engineer in the beginning of this project, and he passed away this year. And he was a leader and someone that really helped us to get things started. And there's one last person, and can't leave him out. He's kind of tries to stay in the background, but he has worked really hard on this project, and that's Scott Collins, the city administrator of Fayetteville, Tennessee. He's really worked hard to help us to get these things done. And thank you for allowing me to thank those people. And now call on Whitney Mitchell to lead our prayer.
Would you pray with me? Gracious and merciful God, we come to this moment after many hours and much labor of love and service for our community in remembrance of those who came before us, and we're reminded of their love and care for people unknown to them. Today, may we not forget their actions, the volunteer spirit to serve you and neighbor far and wide. May we not overlook that throughout time and history there were those who heard your call to live not only for the present, but for future generations. May we remember the words of Jesus, that greater love has no one than this, that we lay down our lives for our friends, fulfilling the greatest commandment of all, loving our neighbor as we love ourselves. Indeed, we hear this call, though at times it may be faint or we may disregard its challenge to us. But above all, we seek to listen and heed its call to us, especially as we dedicate this statue, as we give thanks for the hard work those in our community endeavored to secure a legacy for future generations. We know there are those in our community, both near and far, to whom love is a stranger. May they find in us generous friends as we work and pray towards peace and justice for our neighbors. We ask this in, by, and through your eternal and liberating grace and mercy. Amen.
And now for the presentation of colors, we have Myers Brown, who is Director of Archival Services for the State Museum, along with the living historians, and they'll be assisted by the Lincoln County High School NROTC group and the drum corps from the Lincoln County High School and Fayetteville City High School. And after the colors are presented, then Miss Victoria Matheny will sing the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
And now I'd like to ask our very own Colin Wakefield, who is the president of the Tennessee Society of the War of 1812, to come forward and introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Randy. Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, as president of the Tennessee Society of the War of 1812, it is my privilege today to introduce to you all my friend, President General of the General Society of the War of 1812, Douglas M. Mabee.
Thank you, Colin, for those fine words. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and honored guests, all of you. It is indeed a great honor for me, as President General of the General Society of the War of 1812, to bring greetings on behalf of more than 2,300 members of our society representing every single state. This society was founded by actual veterans, many of whom were from right here. Members are comprised of great-grandsons and great-great-grandsons. One key purpose of this society is to memorialize your patriot ancestors that gathered in other places just like this, at Camp Blount. We strongly believe in preserving the past in order to educate the generations that follow. Often, I am asked, what do you fellows do? Well, we too are volunteers. We encourage research and preservation of historical data pertaining to the War of 1812 specifically. We care for graves of the fallen, memorize battlefields across the nation, and place memorials at national places all around, developing and fostering true patriotism and love of our country. Local volunteers and others throughout the state have been pulling together and collaborating for many years right here. Luckily, this hallowed ground had not been spoiled and has been secured for this sacred purpose of honoring the past and men that gathered here. 14 months ago, 28 volunteers and shovels broke ground right here. 14 months later, here we are today to unveil this beautiful statue of a volunteer. While in other parts of the country, right now, there is turmoil and some cowards are attempting to overturn what we're attempting to remember. I want to thank you all here and thank all of you for being here and supporting what is a wonderful and proud moment to celebrate. Thank you all for being here.
For almost 200 years now, the historical significance of the muster site at Camp Blount and its involvement in supplying troops for two of the most important battles in the War of 1812. Winning battles, by the way. That involvement involved troops going to the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, and then finally supplying troops to the Battle of New Orleans, the victorious battle that ended the War of 1812. This involvement, sadly enough, was little known by the community from which it came. This involvement was not very well known as far as the whole state of Tennessee was concerned. This lack of knowledge and appreciation of this event locally finally began to come to an end in the late 1990s when two events happened. In 1998, the AP history class at our local high school was challenged to investigate the history of Camp Blount and then appeal to the Tennessee General Assembly to pass a resolution to get a highway marker put at the site. And that highway marker has been in place since that time. The second thing that happened was that we hired a historical artist to put on canvas his vision of what the scene at Camp Blount looked like in October of 1813. That historical artist was David Wright. And his original portrait, entitled Crossroads to Destiny, has been hanging in the main courtroom in our courthouse for the past 20 years. Not only has that portrait been available, but over 400 copies of that portrait are inhabited in offices, businesses, and private homes, including my own. And that picture, that portrait, has been the most obvious symbol that we could point to of what probably happened at Camp Blount. The artist is David Wright. David is a premier artist of the American frontier. His paintings depict historical subjects that have been investigated extensively, entirely accurate in the presentation, and the details of his artwork is unbelievable. David is a veteran of the Vietnam War. David's duties during the Vietnam War were multiple. He served as an artist. He served as an advisor and trainer for the local Vietnamese troops. And he was a door gunner in a Huey helicopter. At this time, I know there are a lot of veterans here, and at this time, I ask that you stand. If you're standing, raise your hand, please, so that we can honor you. Please stand. We're honored by your presence with us today, and we are honored by your service to our country. Thank you. You know, this statue is dedicated to the early volunteers and veterans. But it's more than that. It's also dedicated to all the volunteers and veterans who have stepped forward in behalf of their country down through the ages. This is your statue. At this time, we'll hear from David Wright.
As they say, can you hear me now? Okay, good. What a beautiful, glorious day it is to come out here. Isn't it great? And thank all of you for coming out here today. I'm going to open my talk with a quote. And this quote is, "The patriot volunteer fighting for country and his rights and his home makes the most reliable soldier on earth." Thomas Stonewall Jackson. And that's what we're here today about, the volunteer soldier. We're gathered here today to acknowledge this monument that's dedicated to a group of men who have answered the call to their country. That's the Tennessee volunteer. And we're standing on hallowed ground, all of us. 207 years ago, as Ferris said, this month, Tennesseans rallied to the call to defend their homes and their country as they had done before and have done ever since then. And it might be fitting for us to know a little bit of the history about what went on here and what this is all about. So on August 30th, 1813, the Creek Indians, called Red Sticks, surprisingly attacked Fort Mims in Alabama and massacred 250 of the occupants in that fort. Now, 250 people killed doesn't sound like a lot unless you're one of them or your relatives to them. But let's put that in context to what that would have meant today if we'd had an attack on one of our forts in our country. Let's put that in equivalent to today's population. That would amount to 112,000 people. So think of the reaction that must have hit at that time when you had 250 people of ours killed. We went to war in 1941 when 2,403 men were killed at Pearl Harbor on December 7th. We went to war in 2001 when 2,977 people were killed on 9/11. So you think about that equivalency of what the population is today. 250 citizens. So the repercussions of that attack were immediately in Tennessee. The Tennessee governor called on Major General Andrew Jackson to rally the militia to chastise the enemy. And this began what we refer to today as the Creek Indian War. And it began right here. Militia members met here on this mustering ground that today is called Camp Blount, which was named after the then governor, Willie Blount. Approximately 2,500 volunteers, maybe more, offered their services here when called in 1813, placing their lives on the line for causes in which they believed. And we go back to what Stonewall Jackson talked about, the volunteer soldier. Now, I mentioned that Tennesseans rallied here in 1813. Well, this campsite was a mustering grounds way beyond that. This land has served as a mustering grounds in the War of 1812, in August of 1813, October 1813. And again in 1814, when they were called back once again to serve under General Jackson and went down to a place called New Orleans. Had a little scuffle with the British down there and sent them packing. But not only that, again in 1818, the Tennessee Volunteers mustered here for the Seminole Wars, and again in 1838. So we have at least 4 musters that occurred on this grounds throughout the years. And during the war between the states, soldiers camped here as well. So that's why we got historic and hallowed ground right here. It's interesting for the most part, as Ferris kind of pointed out there, that most historians have ignored this campground. No battles are fought here. No surviving structures exist. And no one is exactly sure what the boundaries of this campsite was. It looked like about 200 acres approximately. All of this bottoms here that we're looking at went across that road, which wasn't there in 1813. So you had about 200 acres there that now we're down to 40 acres. Thank goodness that somebody has rallied to the cause and saved this last 40 acres. But by the way, there were some people that are interested in this. In 1913, the Daughters of the American Revolution put a marker here. And by the way, my wife, lovely wife is a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution. And that marker is still here. And a matter of fact, I saw it the other day. It's right in here somewhere. There it is, right over yonder. Take a look at it before you leave, 1913. But it's still laid here, this campground laid here without any attention given to it. Sadly then, in 1927, we had a chance. And there was a movement to have Camp Blount designated a national military park. But that stalled in the U.S. Congress. It didn't happen. What a shame. We had a chance. So it's had its problems through the years being recognized, but we're here. 1951, Tennessee Historical Commission erected a plaque out here on Highway 431, but by 1960s, that plaque was gone. Nobody knew where it went. Still hadn't been found today. But in the mid-1990s, a portion of the Camp Blount site was sold to the Walmart Corporation, and a former part of the muster grounds was lost forever. And that's the shopping center we have right over here. So the encroachment on this land gets smaller and smaller and smaller. In 1998, as Ferris had mentioned, state and local officials placed a highway marker at the entrance to this complex, and it's still there. The Camp Blount Historical Park has come to where we are today only through the efforts of several farsighted and historical loving people, and that's why we're here today. Eugene Hamm and Jerry Mansfield were two of the first to talk about this site a long time ago. There may be more. I'm only familiar with those two, to bring attention to it. And under Mr. Mansfield's leadership, when he was county executive, he brought attention to the importance of Camp Blount, and later, with the help of others, we and future generations have at least these 40 acres to commemorate what happened here many years ago. With the significant contributions of Mr. Fred Prouty back over here with the Tennessee Wars Commission, the park has become a reality today. There are others involved in that as well to bring it to this point today. I just don't know all the names. Now, I mentioned, in fact, that the shopping center was built in the mid-1990s. At that time, just before that, there were 4 surviving witnesses to all the events that happened here in Camp Blount from 1813 and the subsequent years. Trees that were over 200 years old at that time were still here. They're all gone today. They were huge trees. I saw 2 of them that were still standing, 3 to 5 foot diameter, white oaks. When the shopping center was built, they all 4 were here. 2 were removed when the shopping center was built, but 2 were still exist. And they stood on that rise right over there, big white oaks. They're the ones that's in my painting that's in existence right over here. I had the opportunity to see these trees before they died. Hopefully many of you do remember them too. Now, progress is great, and I'm not here to knock progress, but we've lost those 4 witnesses to what went on here many, many years ago. And that's why we're here today, is to remember our history and honor those who have contributed to it, and to dedicate this monument to their memories. So this now park, they've been designated as a state park. And one other incident that took place during that time that brings us to today, and Ferris touched on this briefly. I think it's worthwhile to talk about it. Mr. Mansfield, along with Lincoln County High School teacher Faye Bradford. Is she here today? Faye? I've heard she might be here. Mr. Mansfield is here somewhere. He said he's had a little encounter with COVID, or somebody else that had COVID. It might not be down here, maybe up there. But together, established a scholarship program in 1998 for advanced history class for deserving students to pursue a history curriculum in college. To raise funds for these scholarships, I had the good fortune to be contacted by Jared and wound up doing this painting, Crossroads to Destiny, of the Camp Blount muster in 1813, depicting 4 key players who were here in 1813. General Jackson, who still had his arm in a sling from a duel in Nashville. David Crockett, who later went on to become a Tennessee congressman, and he died at the Alamo in 1836. Ensign Sam Houston with the 39th Infantry, who became governor of Tennessee and also later president of the Republic of Texas. And Fayetteville, Dr. Charles McKinney, whose family have been doctors ever since. All took part in the Creek Indian campaign, and in fact, Dr. Charles McKinney is credited with possibly saving Sam Houston's life after he was wounded twice in the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. When I did this painting, I had the honor of seeing those 2 400-year-old oaks still standing up there. They eventually died. The 2 were already gone. I didn't get to see them. Some of you who have lived here all your life possibly remember those trees. And by the way, I'll say this too, I'm just crass enough to say this. They made limited edition prints of Crossroads to Destiny to raise funds for those scholarships. And today, Lincoln County Historical Commission has prints of those for sale over there. And you can have an opportunity to purchase one of these prints for a good cause. Hope you do. Because of these folks that I mentioned, and others too, which I haven't, we're coming full circle here today. We're dedicating a monument to the Tennessee volunteer, created by the man of the hour, Mr. Wayne Hyde, right over here. A friend of mine, and in my humble opinion, one of the best sculptors in the country today, which will be evidenced when you see this unveiling of this sculpture. But a whole nother group of volunteers that contributed their time and their money to making the monument that we're dedicating here today become a reality. Dr. Beasley, Ben Beddington, Randy Delap, Scott, more people that I can't recall right at the moment. But I look at this as a monument to not only the Tennessee volunteer, but to all volunteers, reaching far beyond the borders of our state. Future generations will see it, to know what they did here. They won't remember us, but we will know what we did here to keep history alive in Fayetteville and Camp Blount. I'm going to close with a quote by President Ronald Reagan. Veterans know better than anyone else the price of freedom, for they've suffered the scars of war, and we can offer them no better tribute than to remember and protect what they have won for us. And that's what we're doing here today. Thank all of you for coming out today. This is a really great showing, isn't it? And I would like to just, for a moment, clap applause to all the people who made this happen, to honor them and to honor our veterans as well. Thank you. There's.
What a beautiful day we have out here. Before I introduce our next speaker, I just wanted to say, from a board perspective, from the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, this came in, we passed this to go forward with this project back in 2013. And since then, it's been everything you would think it would be. It's been a selfless commitment to volunteerism, starting with the members of the Camp Blount Historical Association that continued through the entire process from drafting the plans for this park, organizing and raising money, and many hours of effort to make this a special place to visit, to learn about the Tennessee volunteer spirit. The park would not have come to be without tremendous vision and effort by a great number of people. I'm truly thankful for the contributions by our local citizens, elected officials at the city, county, and state level. Also, all the contractors that have worked on this project, including all our departments between city and county, have helped out. I'd like to thank Fayetteville Public Utilities last week for coming and helping to set this statue. Our next speaker, honored to announce that we have Congressman Scott Desjardins. He represents the 4th District of Tennessee since January of 2011. He's been a staunch advocate for historical preservation, so I'd like to bring him up now to give a few words.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you. What an incredible turnout. I think that the interest is evident, and it kind of speaks for itself how important today is. We're joined by many elected officials here, and what this is really about, though, is preserving our history. And I can't think of anything more appropriate to be doing right now at this point in our history than erecting a statue rather than others who want to tear them down. We live in the greatest country on earth, and it's because of what happened at sites like this and the veterans who stood in this tent area today, and those that serve our country and are willing to shed their blood to protect our freedom. We have a country that we need to preserve, protect, and celebrate always, because it is such a privilege for us to live in this nation. And I'm really anxious to see this. The grounds here are amazing, and as has been mentioned, it's really hard in today's society to make something like this happen. And so to all these people that work so hard for so many years, you heard the history of how long this takes. There's so much bureaucracy that it takes dedication and persistence, and it's got to be such a proud moment for all those who work so hard on this to stand here today to see this great turnout from this great community. Lincoln County has been such a privilege for me to represent over the years, and yeah, I look forward to seeing this. We have a lot of people who need to speak behind me, so I will keep this brief. You're welcome, and just thanks for the privilege of being here today. And let's enjoy the rest of this beautiful day, and let's just never forget the sacrifices that have been made for all of us by so many in the past, and continue to celebrate and get out and vote. That's one of the reasons everyone fought for us. So we have that privilege to have this freedom. People are doing it, but it's an important, critical time in our nation. We've got to reverse some of this counterculture that's been going on, and I don't want to make this political because it's such an important, special day here in the county, but let's not lose sight of what's at stake right now. So please do your part. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. Next is Mr. Jim Tracy, who is the State Director for USDA Rural Development.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you for those good comments, Congressman. It's great to be here with you today. Good morning to everybody. What a great turnout from the community. I just want to say, for me, it's a very humbling today to be a small part of this dedication today of the Camp Blount site. I want to give you just a brief history for the young people. I've met a lot of young people here today. They're in leadership groups. Let me give you an example of why it's important. If you have a dream, if you want people to remember history, if you want something that's important to you, never give up on what your dream is. It goes back to probably 2010 when I was a state senator at that time. I know Dr. Beasley and Jerry Mansfield and the whole Camp Blount Historical Association came to see me in Nashville and brought me a picture, the print from David Wright, and said, well, we want you to put this up in your office. And I put it up in the office. It was a great conversation piece, but bottom line is when they come to see you, they want money to be able to do something for Camp Blount. That was 10 years ago. We started working on that. I know Lieutenant Governor's here today. At that time, he was a state senator. We talked about it way back then with the two chairmen. He was the chairman of finance, and we talked about it. So I say that, young people, if you have a dream, never give up on your dream. Work hard to do this. For people that were ahead of you thought about this Camp Blount site and how important it is for generations to come for people to remember this site. So it was a great opportunity to be a small part of that. And then when I became the State Director of USDA Rural Development in 2017, I was approached about seeing if we could help with this Camp Blount site. And I said, don't know, but I'd like to help if we could. And then we got to working on it, and we were able to give a grant for the signage out by the road so people, when they come by this site, they can see that it is Camp Blount. And so excited to be a part of this. What a great day it is to be here, as the congressman said, so we can remember the folks that fought ahead of us, so we can have the freedoms that we have today to live in the greatest country in the world. So thank you for all the folks that have been involved in this. Congratulations to everybody involved. Congratulations to Lincoln County and Fayetteville for this great site here at Camp Blount. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Next, we have Ms. Nina Skall, who is the Director of the Tennessee Wars Commission.
I know I'm the smallest person here. Okay. Can y'all hear me? Good morning. I'm Nina Skall. I'm the Program Director of the Tennessee Wars Commission. I'm honored to be here today. Thanks so much for having me. The State Historic Preservation Officer, Patrick McIntyre, and Tennessee Historical Commission Chair, Dorita Williams, wish they could be here today. But the Commission's fall board meeting is in progress at this exact moment. They send their greetings and sincere regrets. It is a tremendous honor to be here today as we dedicate this statue to the Tennessee volunteer at the very place where the volunteer state likely got its name. The Tennessee Wars Commission, which is a division of the Tennessee Historical Commission dedicated to preserving sites associated with our state's military heritage, is proud of our long commitment to this site, from sponsoring the development of the master plan for this property almost 10 years ago, before it was even acquired for preservation, to our $65,000 in funding towards this statue that is an important element of the site development plan. The history of Camp Blount dates back to the time of the Native Americans. Evidence of prehistoric habitation was first noted during the 1806 survey of the Fayetteville area. Surveyors noted shells, potsherds, projectile points, and other items of material culture. The shoals in the Elk River just west of the area were part of native hunting trails. And although Camp Blount has a very interesting prehistory, it's obviously known best for its role in the Creek War and the War of 1812. In the fall of 1813, at the beginning of the Creek War, Governor Willie Blount sent out a rally cry for volunteers needed to suppress the Creek uprising. 3,500 militiamen heard the cry and rendezvoused at the Camp Blount site. These volunteers were placed under the command of the then Major General Andrew Jackson. In addition to Jackson, many historically important men heeded the call and came here, including Sam Houston, Davy Crockett, John Coffey, Isaac Roberts, and William Hall, to name a few. Camp Blount again became a rallying point for the troops marching against the British in October of 1814. General John Coffey and some 3,100 militiamen met at the campsite before marching south, preparing for a British invasion of the Gulf Coast. Tennessee volunteers again assembled at Camp Blount, twice during the Seminole Wars in 1818 and again in 1836. Camp Blount's historical significance is firmly rooted in the role of the camp as the main mustering site in Tennessee associated with the Creek War and the War of 1812. The repeated call to duty answered on these very grounds subsequently helped to solidify Tennessee's reputation as a volunteer state. The Battle of Horseshoe Bend, fought in what is now Alabama, made Andrew Jackson a national figure, and the Battle of New Orleans cemented his fame, propelling him into the presidency in 1828. A site of such importance in Tennessee's history and the history of our nation deserves to be preserved for generations to come. Heeding the calls of locals in the Camp Blount Historic Sites Association, like Dr. Ferris Beasley, who had long noted its prominence, in 2013, the Tennessee Historical Commission purchased the site during the National Bicentennial Commemoration of the War of 1812. The site was acquired using funds from a special one-time appropriation from the Tennessee General Assembly that was dedicated to acquire historic properties. This was matched with funding from the State Lands Acquisition Fund from the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. And longtime Wars Commission Program Director Fred Prouty was instrumental in overseeing this acquisition effort. The city of Fayetteville then entered into a primary caretaker agreement with the Tennessee Historical Commission. This was to oversee and administer the property. The 38-acre Camp Blount parcel is now preserved in perpetuity as Camp Blount Memorial Park. Fayetteville City Manager Scott Collins deserves a great deal of credit for his leadership and dedication to this project, along with former Representative Steve McDaniel, the Fayetteville City Mayors, as well as the Fayetteville Board of Aldermen. The city and the association are now actively developing Camp Blount Memorial Park into a place of remembrance and interpretation of the events that took place here. In addition, this will be a wonderful community amenity for enjoying the great outdoors along the scenic Elk River. There'll be a memorial plaza for reflection, a living history area for interpretation, as well as interpretive panels along the many walking trails. And lastly, the plan will connect the existing Stone Bridge Park to Father's Memorial Park and to the Camp Blount site through walking trails. As we gather here today to dedicate this statue and reflect on the rich history of Camp Blount, we can't help but think about its future. And although past historic preservation efforts have been successful, there is still plenty of work to do to bring this remarkable preservation plan to fruition. Thanks so much.
Our next speaker is Representative Pat Marsh, who represents the 62nd District in the House of Representatives of the state of Tennessee. He is as instrumental as anybody else in helping us out, so we'd like to bring him up and have a few words.
Thank you very much, Mayor. What a great day for the volunteer state. What a great day for Shelbyville and Bedford County Lincoln County and the state of Tennessee. We've had several local people that have worked very hard on this, and I'm just a small part to make this huge project work. But John Ed, I see you out there. We got a lot of calls from John Ed and Gwen and John Law and Jerry Mansfield and mainly Scott Collins that worried the heck out of Jim Tracy and I. Like Jim said, everybody wanted money from the state. And we worked it very hard because in our hearts and minds, we knew this was a great project that was going to bring great tourism to the city of Fayetteville and to Lincoln County. And tourism means they buy gas, they stay in motels, they buy food, they spend money, sales taxes come back to the city and county and to the state. So it's a win-win for everybody. I want to thank the Governor Bill Haslam, he met with us several times and he wanted to do this project, but he had a lot of projects on his list. So Jim Tracy and I went and met with some of these folks that are back here today. We met with Governor Haslam. We met with Deputy Governor Jim Henry, who's here today. We met with Deputy Speaker Steve McDaniel, who is a history buff and who I knew if we could get it done and get Steve on our side, we would get it done. We met with the Chairman of Finance, Charles Sargent, who is no longer with us. We met with the Chair of Finance with the Senate, Lieutenant Governor Randy Mcnally, who put his heart and soul into it too. So we had a lot of people that bought into this that made it possible. But Scott Collins and the local people like Randy DeLapp and Dr. Beasley, they had passion in their heart to make sure this happened for the city and county, and I am so proud to be a small part of it. Thank you very much for having me today and for this project.
So a name that whenever you talk to Scott Collins or Randy DeLapp or Dr. Beasley, a name that keeps coming up of a person that was a very key part of this was former Deputy Speaker Steve McDaniel. You'll hear a refrain that was like, we couldn't get this done without Steve McDaniel. He retired in 2018 as Deputy Speaker of the House of Tennessee General Assembly. Served in the 96th through the 109th General Assemblies, historian, Parker Crossroads Battlefield Association, as Representative Pat Marsh just mentioned, instrumental in working with late Representative House Finance Chair Charles Sargent, Pat Marsh, Rick Tillis, then Senator Jim Tracy, and Lieutenant Governor Randy Mcnally in arranging for the direct appropriation of $500,000 that helped build what we are at today. So it's a great honor to have Mr. Steve McDaniel come and speak.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure for Phyllis and me to be able to join you today. I don't know, I remember my first trip here to meet over at, I guess it was the City Hall with the mayor and some of the board, and Scott Collins I met there, I believe, for the first time. And it was Fred Prouty, who's sitting here quietly today, and his wife Cheryl, who joined him as well, who started telling me prior to that meeting the history of Camp Blount and the importance of the preservation efforts here. And Dr. Beasley and Fred and Scott and so many people who have been involved here today are inspirations for those of us who care about preservation. And when I walked onto this site today, it was unbelievable, the transformation that had taken place. This beautiful entrance with that sign, Jim, that you see when you first come in. And then I looked across the expanse of this property. It looked nothing like what it did the first time I was able to visit the site. So since then, the last time I was here, it was mentioned by Pat, Representative Marsh, that our friend Charles Sargent was here, and we had a nice picnic lunch down by the river here. And Pat later sent me a photograph of the three of us, which I will forever treasure in my possession. So to all of you, my congratulations to getting you to the point you are today, and I just can hardly wait to see this beautiful statue. Thank you.
Back in 2017, then Senator Jim Tracy was appointed as State Director of Rural Development, and in his place, a special election was held, and Shane Reeves now serves as District 14 representative in the state Senate, and I'm honored to have him come up and say a few words.
Good morning, Lincoln County. Mayor, appreciate that. Not a whole lot left to say, is there? I'm very honored to be your state senator here for the 14th district. Been doing this for a couple of years. Thrilled to see this great crowd, and I'm thrilled to see so many young people out here today. You know, I love Tennessee, and I love Tennessee history. My family moved to Middle Tennessee in 1780. The Reeveses have been here for 240 years. My great-great-great-great-grandfather actually named his first granddaughter Tennessee Reeves in honor of the new state that was going to be founded in 1796. So I have deep roots in the state and very much love history. Today's a little bit full circle for me. When I originally decided to run for office in November of 2017, one of the first places I went was a little restaurant called the Chuck Wagon. They used to be here in town for breakfast one morning. And I sat there with Jim Tracy and Pat Marsh and Rick Tillis and others, and there was a guy sitting there named Jerry Mansfield that I really didn't know at the time, and he had a hat on. And I asked him, I said, "So what is this Camp Blount?" And he said, "Well, Reeves, if you're going to run for office, it's called Camp Blount." And it's kind of full circle to be here today. Again, it's a beautiful day. I agree with the Congressman Desjardins. It's great to see statues going up as opposed to coming down, and I very much appreciate you letting me say a few words. It's my honor at this time. There's 33 senators in the state, and the leader of the Senate is here today, Lieutenant Governor Randy Mcnally. He's been a good friend to me, loves the state, loves history, and we're honored to have him here today as part of this ceremony. So if you would, help me welcome the Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Shane, and I want to thank each and every one of you, because all of you are volunteers, and you reflect the spirit of the people that originally came here for the War of 1812, for the Creek and Indian Wars, and you represent them well. And the reason this statue and this park is here is because of you, and also because of the representatives that you sent to Nashville. my job back then was as chair of the Finance Committee, along with Charles Sargent, who chaired the House Finance Committee. And our one thing to do was present the governor with a balanced budget. And there were all these amendments that get added for very good things, but they throw the budget out of balance. And sometimes there's 400 and 500, 600 amendments. And our job is to say no a number of times. And when Jim Tracy came and Rick Tillis and Pat Marsh and Shane Reeves came to us, and also Steve McDaniel, and asked us to do this project and told us the importance of it and how it played an integral part in history, we couldn't say no to it. And I want to thank them especially for the job that they did in carrying your wishes to Nashville and seeing this park and this land that it's on be purchased by the state of Tennessee. But thank each and every one of you very much, and thank my colleagues who really made this happen, and of course Governor Haslam, who has the final say and can line item veto anything that's in the budget, and was a strong supporter of this along the way. But thank you all very much.
Well, now's the part you've been waiting for. We're going to dedicate the statue, and I'm going to call Dr. Ferris Beasley up. He has been the, as far as the Camp Blount Historic Site Association, he has been the ramrod to make sure all this has happened. So I'm going to call him up and let him do the honors.
Randy, I've been looking around this group of our local citizens to see if there's anybody here who's had experience unveiling an 8.5-foot bronze statue. I find the responsibility of doing this a little bit intimidating, to the point that I'm not going to do it. There's somebody here today who's eminently more qualified to do this than I am. This person has been literally sleeping with this monument for the last, off and on for the last 2 years. He's pondered it, he's studied it, he's researched it. He's probably lost some sleep over it, trying to meet the various deadlines that he had to make. It would be interesting to know the number of hours his hands have put in forming this statue, beginning with a bag of clay to make that first miniature reproduction, and then to use more clay to get to the point where he had something big enough to cast in the forge in Montana. Wayne Hyde has done this for him, and I'm wondering, Wayne, if during handling of this historic monumental statue you were touched by what you were doing. So at this time, Wayne is going to come forward and share his heartfelt thoughts that he probably experienced while doing this. Wayne Hyde.
I want to thank everybody for coming to help make this dedication a success. I want to thank the city of Fayetteville and the committee for choosing me and giving me the opportunity to do this significant historic monument to honor the Tennessee volunteers. I got to work with the great committee here. My main contact was Randy Delap. Thank you, Randy. Great to work with. Dr. Beasley, all of those involved with this are just a great bunch of people. You know, I do these monuments around the United States, and I get to meet a lot of people. And one of the things that I see is towns like Fayetteville, you're the real heart of America. You're what makes America great. And I thank you for the opportunity to work with the folks here and do this monument. I also want to thank my friend David Wright. It was 2015, David called me and he said, they're going to do a monument of Sam Houston from Maryville. And he said, you'd be perfect for the job. He said, why don't you put in for that piece and see if you could get it? And I did, and I went through selection and they picked me. And that was my first chance to do a monument in the great state of Tennessee. Next, I did Abraham Lincoln for Duncan School of Law in Knoxville. And now another great opportunity came to me to do this piece here, and I'm very honored to do this, to represent the Tennessee Volunteers and their importance in the formation of America. I'll tell you a little bit about what you're going to see when we unveil this piece. He's got his waistcoat and hunting shirt on. He's got a southern banded horn, a wooden canteen, his bedroll, haversack, a bag and tomahawk. But one of the most significant things about this piece is the rifle that I used for reference for this was Crockett's rifle, actual rifle that Crockett had owned. David Crockett owned this rifle, and it was, the owner of it is Mr. Joe Swan of Maryville, and he gave me access to the rifle. I got to photograph it, measure the rifle, and one of the great things for me, I actually got to hold the rifle and get my photograph taken with David Crockett's rifle. I mean, from a kid up, you know, like figures like David Crockett, Daniel Boone, I mean, they were, you know, they were very significant to me whenever I was young. And so the chance to do this is just an incredible moment. I shot photographs in 2014 or 15 in Gettysburg with the intention of doing a Tennessee Volunteer, not knowing, have any idea at that time that I would actually get chosen to do one. So I had photo reference since then. And then also Fred Prouty, we shot photos of him as well to do this piece. So it's a great opportunity for me, and I'm thankful for it. So, well, I guess we'll get this cover off and see what I did.
I got you a big money shot.
You did that.